Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Daily Marvel Snap video. Today I'm going to be showcasing a deck that kind of came out of nowhere. It's a new breed of discard deck, and that's a Lockjaw rotation discard, which on first thought sounds really crazy, but it has an incredibly strong potential power push. Now, once Black Panther and the really strong high-powered cards die down, this is going to be a top contender for those games. So it can't quite keep up with a really high power push from a Wong and a Black Panther, but pretty much any other deck, it is very solid. This can push a lot of power, and it has a lot of different win conditions that it can rely on. One of the primary win conditions is going to be Dracula. We have so many means to discard a lot of cards rather quickly that Dracula is oftentimes going to have a really large apocalypse to absorb into. And then similar to Dracula, we have Morbius. It's not uncommon for Morbius to be 8 to 10 power for a 2-cost card, because we're going to be cycling so many cards that even though cards are getting discarded, we have cards that are returning back into our hand. So Morbius is going to get buffed up, and we're not going to have the downside of reducing our hand size. And so Morbius and Dracula and Apocalypse are kind of our plan A. Those three will work in unison to be able to push power, strong power, into multiple lanes. And then plan B is going to be a Lockjaw rotation. If we don't have the primary cards in hand, we can always go on a rotation spree to be able to discard cards, put the discard cards back into our hand, or we can flip swarms back into our deck, and then that will pull out potential discard cards. And then plan C is going to be Hela. If we discard too many of our discard cards and we just need that resurge to be able to bring those back onto the board, to be able to push our Apocalypse higher, or to be able to push our Morbius higher. Hela's going to be able to resummon any of our discard cards that got discarded, and then they're going to give us a big surge on that final turn. If we discard her, it's okay, because she is plan C. And then we have Chavez in the list for some consistency. And so it's one of those decks that you should not knock it until you try it, because when I first heard of Lockjaw discard on the Snap.fan Discord, I was skeptical. I was really concerned. And it turns out that it works pretty well. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Ray Shortboxed. The first location is Kunlun, which if we move cards over, which we don't have anything that will move, but any cards that are moved over will get +2 power. The middle location is Atlantis. We do have Colleen Wing and Swarm, but we also have Blade, so we need to kind of hold it for now. I think next turn we might go with a Colleen Wing plus a Blade if we don't draw anything into anything that competes for that 2-cost slot. If we draw into something a little bit higher, then we can get some additional upside from it. So let's do that. We do have our Lockjaw if we do need to drop it at some point. Actually, no, I think it's going to be safer. Our Dracula is one of our big win conditions. So I think I don't think we're gonna discard this turn. I think we're gonna just prep our Lockjaw onto the board. Ooh, they do a Cosmo into the Onslaught Citadel. It's gonna be interesting. So now if we start cycling, actually, on 4, we're gonna go ahead and play our Dracula. And so we can do Dracula either here or here. Either one is gonna be absolutely fine. I think we play him into Atlantis. We will go on a cycle spree next turn, more than likely. Maybe we end up doing Hellcow and Blade. Maybe we do Colleen Wing, Blade, and then another low-cost card that we draw into. That way we can give it more chances for our Apocalypse to get discarded, or our Swarm. They have a Colleen Wing and discarded their Swarm. So they're running some kind of discard deck, but the Cosmo is an interesting one that they have like teched into their deck. So since this is turn 5, we could do Lady Sif as the guaranteed trigger for Apocalypse, but I think what we're going to do, I think we go with a Hellcow and a Blade. That's going to discard 3 of our remaining cards, and we'll cycle into something else. But I kind of like the idea of having our 6-power Hellcow left out on the board. And so let's go ahead and cycle 1 card. We're going to discard 3 cards total, and so maybe we'll get some upside here. Maybe we'll get some good triggers from the Apocalypse and the Swarm, and we'll be able to retain some of our good cards. So Hellcow, the first discard is Apocalypse, and then the second one is Swarm. Oh my gosh, what a great roll. And then Blade hits Swarm as well. That is the highest of high rolls. And then we rotate into America Chavez, which is great. Then we pull back into our Blade. So we don't have our Morbius on the board or in our hand. So what we can do, We can do swarm, swarm, and then we can do a swarm over here. Okay, hold on. So let's do a swarm, a swarm. We're going to rotate 2 of our discard cards. So we're going to rotate Colleen Wing and our blade, but let's drop this first. So we're going to do Lady Sif first. That will discard our Apocalypse. We're going to do Colleen Wing and blade here. That will also discard our Apocalypse, and then it's going to pull into Dracula. Dracula is going to pull into this massive Apocalypse that we're building up. We will lose the Onslaught Citadel lane, but our idea is that we rotate into some strong cards in Kunlun, and we keep our upside in Atlantis, because this is going to be a massive, massive Apocalypse. Let's go ahead and let this one play out. They did snap, so they're feeling confident. The Shang-Chi it's okay. That's all that's over in that lane, and that's not going to be a win condition for them. They do a swarm in mid and far right. I'm kind of confused at what they thought was going to happen here. So Lady Sif discards our Apocalypse. That's 1. Colleen Wing discards it twice, or once more, and then it's going to cycle into another card. That could be Swordmaster, which discards it. That is 3. And then Blade is going to pop up. That's going to be 4. And it's going to cycle into another one, which could be a Colleen Wing. It could be Hela. It could be any number of things. And that's Hela. And so that's going to resummon our Swarm and our Swarm that we discarded earlier. So now we have 12 over on the right-hand side. We have a 32 power Apocalypse that comes down into our Dracula lane. Absolutely nuts. And we almost found the win condition in the Onslaught Citadel as well. If we had flipped or drawn into Morbius, he would have been massive. So Apocalypse by himself was discarded 6 times. So Morbius would have probably been like 16 power or more. We are going to take that 8 cube. Let's jump over into the next one. All right, so we are in the presence of greatness. We are going up against Doctor Strange. And in our starting hand, we have Hela, we have Lockjaw, we have Swarm. Not a great start. Ooh, and then Warrior Falls is the first location. Now, Warrior's Fall is interesting because after each turn, the cards there are going to fight and destroy themselves. And so it becomes a little bit risky to drop anything low power. I've also heard that if you have 2 cards and your opponent has none, then your 2 cards will fight. And then one will get destroyed. I don't know. We're going to go ahead and play Colleen Wing. That will discard our Swarm. We're going to start kind of building up our discard army. And so the Colleen Wing will discard Swarm. That'll give them 2 back in return. We may drop our Lockjaw next turn, depending on what this... Ooh, the TVA location is a spicy one. So, with the game ending on turn 4 or after turn 4, with 2 free swarms, that's already a huge upside. We also had Lockjaw, so we were going to be able to rotate into some potentially bigger cards as well. And so they ended up retreating. Let's jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Vanguard, and the first location is Mojo World. We have no worries about capping that one out. The one thing that this deck does very, very well, very consistently, is getting your power onto the board. So we're going to hold our blade for now. They do drop a hood. Kiln is an interesting one as well. We now have our Swarm. We have our Apocalypse. I think we're going to risk it. We have 2 out of 4. We have 2 out of 4 targets that are decent discards. If it hits our Lockjaw, that's kind of unfortunate. Nope, we're going to play the patience game. I wanted to, but it's a 50-50 coin flip at that point. So we could do... We now have Hela in hand. We can do Lockjaw. That will allow us to start rotating some of our cards if we need to. They do a Deathlock and Kiln. If we can avoid discarding our Hela, then that'll be perfect. But we're going to risk it. Let's play Morbius into Kiln. We're going to cycle our blade, and then we're just going to see what happens. We do have Swarm. We have Apocalypse in hand. I think those are our 2 win conditions. Ooh, so they destroyed their Mojo World location. Our blade would have been destroyed, but we didn't play him last turn, and we're going to cycle him anyways. So they have a pretty big... Ooh, and it hits our Apocalypse, which is massive. And then it's going to rotate into our Chavez, which is great. That is beautiful. I could not have asked for a better setup. Let's go with Colleen Wing. That's going to guarantee discard our Swarm. I think at that point, we also drop our Swordmaster into the Dark Dimension. If we can avoid discarding our Hela this turn, then we can hide our Hela here. That's going to resummon some additional cards back onto the board. It actually resummons the swarms that it discards, and we can find ourselves with a decent amount of upside. We'll be able to have a free rotation from the swarm, and it just gives us some pretty good targets. Dracula would be great. Lady Sif, oh no, that is awful. That is not what we wanted. So now we can do the guaranteed discard of Blade. We have 3 cards left in our deck. One is Hellcow, which will discard a couple of cards for us. One is Dracula, which would be ideal. And then the last one is Colleen Wing, which will discard our Apocalypse. So this is going to be 1 trigger. This is 2. So that will buff this up to 10. If we cycle into a Dracula, that'll discard as well. That'll bump this up to 12. If we cycle into Hellcow, same thing. Actually, any one that we cycle into will bump this up to 12 power versus the 10. Unless they can go wide, we have the win condition in Mojo World. We should have the win condition with our Morbius because he's gonna be massive. And so Blade has the guaranteed discard of Apocalypse. We then rotate out. We're looking for a Dracula, ideally. Colleen Wing is okay. That buffs our Morbius up to 10. Swordmaster will buff it up to 22, but we're just gonna have to look at the pretty numbers, 24. We're gonna have to look at the pretty numbers in hand. That pushes our kiln location up. Oh my gosh, and then they use a Doc Ock. Do they have a Shang-Chi to try and destroy this? And then the arrow, and then the demon. Oh no, they did us the biggest favor. We get the clean sweep because we discard so many cards that our Morbius by himself is able to take out the Deathlock and the Killmonger in mid. We have the 4 cards in Mojo World, the massive Dark Dimension lane. This deck is so much fun. It's been so long since I've enjoyed a discard deck because it just feels clunky for the most part. This one feels really good, and it has a really high roll that is really satisfying to hit. All right, so next up we have Yuma, and in our starting hand we have, I think this is pretty close to the dream. We have Dracula, perfect. We have Apocalypse, perfect. That is our discard target. And then we... All right, so next up we have Perilled. And the first location is Danger Room, which is not the best, but we do have Dracula in our starting hand, which is good. They play a Quicksilver. It sticks in the Danger Room. We could risk it with a Blade, but we're just going to go ahead and pass. And then maybe we do a Swordmaster, but with only having 1 solid target for our discards, we might even continue skipping until we can drop our Dracula, unless we draw into something like Colleen Wing, or Apocalypse would be a good secondary target, or maybe even Morbius or Lockjaw. We would play both of those on the following turn. Okay, so now they curve into Quicksilver and Domino. Let's go ahead and play Morbius into the big house because cards that cost 4, 5, and 6 aren't going to be able to be played there, so it's not going to be a great target for our Dracula, for a Hela resummon, for anything like that. They did have a card get destroyed in Danger Room. Ooh, and then Miniaturized Lab is actually, oh man, is locked down. We're going to gamble. We're going to gamble it. We're going to try to stick Dracula into the Danger Room. We want to get him out onto the board before we start flooding the board with discard cards. And so we need to take the risk. And we get the 75% upside. Let's drop our Lady Sif. Let's go ahead and drop Blade as well. Blade is going to have a 2 out of 4 chance at getting a good target in the Apocalypse or Swarm. Let's go ahead and lock that in because next turn is going to be the final turn. They do drop a Jubilee into Danger Room, which is going to pull into a Chavez. Interesting. And then Blade does discard our Apocalypse when Lady Sif actually hits our Hela instead. We can now do Swordmaster and Swarm into the middle location. It looks like they're running a very mid-range style deck where they have the 1-2, and then that makes their Jubilee a little bit more consistent. But that's okay. We have the potential to pull into a 12 power card. We have the potential to pull into maybe just 9. I think we push a little bit of power here and we try our luck. No, our win condition is going to be left and far right, so we're going to push both cards into the Danger Room instead. We're going to let them have Miniaturized Lab. I assume they do something pretty large. So the Hulk, we just need one of these to stick to have a good upside. That's not it. That's not it. Come on, we need the upside of the Swarm here. We get the double downside. It is going to absorb our Apocalypse. It's going to discard him, and then it actually gains the power of the returned card, not the one that was in your hand, and so it actually still becomes 16. And so even though we got the really bad RNG from the Danger Room, the big house, he becomes 8, and Dracula in the far left becomes 16. And with that, we are going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the Lockjaw discard rotation. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.